Hey guys, I'm JT Shaver, and today we'll be looking at what I think might be the best overall mini motorized slider you can buy. First, if you want to keep up with the latest camera and lighting gear reviews, make sure you hit subscribe and the notification bell so you don't miss the next video. Motorized camera sliders are one of the easiest ways to get super smooth cinematic footage. Unfortunately, they're not always practical to carry around simply because of their size. That's where the YC Onion chocolate slider comes in. This slider has one of the least appetizing names out there, but there is a lot to love about it, so let's look at some of the positive aspects first. Inside the minimally designed box, you'll find the slider itself, a portable power cable for using USB power banks, a 3/8 to 1/4 inch adapter, an Allen wrench, and instructions. The build quality and finish on this slider are both really nice, and of course it's super lightweight and compact. It's about 1 foot long, 3.5 inches deep, and just a few inches tall and weighs less than 2 pounds. It can fit into smaller camera bags really easily, and because of its size, it works well with smaller tripods. That makes it really good for beginners or people that do a lot of traveling or vlogging. The setup on this slider is pretty much the same as any other slider, but because everything is so small and lightweight, I would argue that the setup time for this slider is the fastest out of anything out there. To me, that's a big deal because I often find myself avoiding different gear simply because it takes longer to set up than it does to actually use and get the shot that I want. This slider can be powered by Sony NPF W50 batteries, or like I said, with a USB power bank. With one battery, you can get about 6 hours of life out of this thing, and for how small these batteries are, that's pretty amazing. It's easy enough to have 2 little batteries on hand, but if you forget them or you just don't want to buy them, the ability to use a power bank is really nice. This slider can be used totally wirelessly, and if you're going to use the time-lapse feature, you can use a corded or a wireless shutter release. The motor on the slider is also really quiet. It's not the quietest I've heard, but it is on the quieter end, and you'd have no problem using this in an interview situation with a B camera or something like that. Keep in mind this slider is really geared towards B-roll because it doesn't have any motion control or automated parallax effect. One of the cool things about this design is that you get double the distance on the slider when it's mounted on a tripod. That's because the tripod mount and the camera mount move in opposite directions when the slider is running. If you have it set on a desk or a table when you're using it, you get about half the distance. It does have a 3/8 inch to 1/4 inch adapter, which is nice to use with all kinds of tripod heads, or you can screw your camera directly to the 1/4 inch adapter if you don't need to be able to point it exactly where you want. This slider can hold 22 pounds when it's sitting on its feet, which is pretty remarkable given how small that it is. If you use this slider on a tripod and horizontally, it can hold 6.6 pounds. If you use it at a 45-degree angle, it can support 2.86 pounds. And if you're using it totally vertically, it'll hold 1.5 pounds. The maximum travel on a tripod is 11 inches or 280 millimeters, and if you have it set down on a desk or a table, it's about half that. This slider features all of the basic functions, including automated speed, looping automatically from A to a B point, including dampening, that way it doesn't stop too abruptly, as well as time-lapse shooting. Now, there are a few things to keep in mind if you're considering this slider over a bigger, more traditional type slider. There's no parallax or panorama bar, so you're a little bit limited on your movements. This can be a pretty big consideration because if you combine 2 movements at once, you can create some really professional looking footage. So with a parallax bar, you can have the camera moving side to side, but also turning in and out to point at something at the same time. That can be a little more interesting than simply sliding forward to back or side to side alone. With that said, you can't really expect too much for something this small and at this price. There are small sliders out there that have motorized motion controls, but they are way more expensive. And to me, that kind of defeats the purpose of a small slider, which I think is portability and ease of use. One thing I really love is when a great product also has a great carrying case, but unfortunately that's not the case here. This slider just comes with a bag, and it just doesn't live up to the quality and the build of the slider itself. For now, I just keep it in the box that it came in, which is fine, but it would be really nice if it came with a dedicated carrying case, especially if you could fit a couple batteries and a charger inside. Another thing to mention is that on my bigger sliders, when there's no power going to the motor, you can still use them as a manual slider. With this one, you can't really do that. I've tried moving it with no battery inserted, and it takes a lot of force to move it, so I just decided not to ever try again. It feels like I'm gonna break something if I keep doing that, so I would recommend against trying that with this slider. Like I said, this uses NP-FW50 batteries instead of the traditional bigger NPF batteries, and that can be a good thing or a bad thing. Obviously, using these batteries makes it as compact as possible, but this is the only item I have that uses batteries like this. So I can keep them together in the box with the slider as a little kit, but it's just extra batteries that I didn't have before that I have to manage and make sure they're charged all the time. The other big consideration for this slider is that there is no remote, it only uses a mobile phone app. Now, I was a little worried at first, but the app works extremely well and it never disconnects, and even if I close the app and reopen it, it's always ready to go. With all that said, it's still kind of worrisome because iOS might get updated or the app might get discontinued, and if that happens, I just have no way of using the slider. I would gladly pay to get a dedicated optional remote for this slider. This slider was $399 when I bought it, and it's a little more expensive than some of my bigger, more traditional sliders, but you're kind of paying for the build quality, the ease of use, and how compact it is. Because of how small and simple it is to use, it's really great for vlogging or B-roll when you're traveling and things like that. This slider has worked perfectly well with my M50 and kit lens, as well as my Sony a7R Mark III with a Tamron 28-75 lens, which is a lot heavier. So for me, the main questions are whether or not you need the parallax and panorama effect, and whether or not you need the extra distance that you get out of a bigger slider. The ideal situation is obviously to have both, but if you don't have that in your budget, you'll have to choose one or the other. I'll have affiliate links to this slider and the others that I use in the description, and it doesn't cost you anything extra, but it does help me create more videos like this. Also, leave a comment and let me know if you would rather have this slider or something bigger with parallax capabilities. That's it for now, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.